This is part 2 of the Starting Up in Business video. We just talked about bank accounts, which banks to go for. Look to link in with your software. One I didn't mention, which I should have mentioned, a Cash Plus account. I've got a lot of clients using those now. You can set them up within about 2 minutes. It's very, very clever. Fixed fee, I think it's £69 as we speak a year, and no other charges, and links very nicely with QuickBooks. So that's one to consider if you're not necessarily looking for a high street presence. But anyway, look up the website cashplus.com, I think it is, or .co.uk, you'll find it. That's very easy to set up. There's very little sort of identification stuff needed, as the other banks tend to ask you for. So you've got your bank set up. So now you're going to look at implementing your bookkeeping system, and you may choose a manual bookkeeping system, which could just be a ledger. You might want to go the old-fashioned way and have ledgers and just listing out on a book. And this can depend on how big your business is. If you're a subcontractor, perhaps that's quite adequate for you. You just have 2 pages, the left-hand side of the page, you put your income, the right-hand side, your expenses for the month, and just have a page for each month. Reference up your receipts against it. Starting at number 1, write a 1 on the receipt, write a 1 in the book. Very nice, very easy. And it's perfectly legal to do that, no problem. Alternatively, if you're happy with spreadsheets, do the same kind of thing on a spreadsheet. Keep it simple, keep 1 tab for income, 1 tab for expenses. Again, the tax man will be very happy with that, especially if it's referenced up to receipts. So you don't have to spend money on an online package. If you do have a bigger business, and when I'm talking about a bigger business, even turnover over 30,000, it might be worth considering one of the online versions. QuickBooks Online has a couple of packages which are great. Xero, that's with an X, Xero, another very, very good accounting package, a bit more expensive than the QuickBooks offering, but excellent. So consider your systems with what your needs are. Nowadays, with all the internet traders, they want to link their transactions to an online system. So QuickBooks and Xero both work very, very nicely with that. You possibly want your eBay or your PayPal automatically coming into the system, so you haven't got to enter up all your transactions. So yeah, consider that. Maybe you start manually and then you move on to an online system. It depends how if you're trying to save money, that's a spreadsheet may be a great way to save money. So once you've decided on your system, get your invoice templates all sorted out, so you can, if you need to, invoice those, and then learn how to, if you're using one of the online ones, learn how to do it. There's online tutorials for QuickBooks, for Xero. Just use the free resource. Next point to consider will be possibly VAT registration. It may even be voluntary VAT registration, so consider that. If you're invoicing VAT registered customers, it may well be that you could do a voluntary registration even if you're not at the turnover level of £85,000. If the customer can get back your VAT, there may well be an argument for just registering anyway. Flat rate scheme, consider that. I think I've talked about that in previous videos. It used to be fantastic. There's still a time and a place for it, but it's not really for the one-man service company that it was a year ago. It was fantastic. It's now hardly worth the bother if you're a one-man service company with 1 client. It just doesn't really work. If you do go VAT registered, you're going to need to consider whether you operate cash accounting or invoice accounting. Again, can make a big difference to your cash flow. So consider that. Talk to other people about it. Look it up online. So VAT, yep, consider that. And then the next thing, maybe you may employ somebody. So you might need to have a payroll scheme. Again, that can be quite tricky. We operate a payroll bureau, which it works very nicely, especially when in conjunction with the new auto-enrolment pension scheme the government have introduced. So if you're setting up a business now, and this video is being recorded in February 2018, so if you do set up a payroll scheme now, you're automatically going to have to deal with auto-enrolment pension. Whether you can exempt yourself maybe, whether you've got to operate it, whether you'd want to take the 3-month delay they give you before you have to set it up, but it needs to be dealt with. It's expensive if they penalise you for not complying. There's fines of £1,000 that I've seen being given out. So it's a lot of money. It's not the £100 fine that you might be used to with self-assessment. It can be £1,000. Worth doing it. You know, there's various types of various providers for the pension scheme. There's most of them you have to pay for. Nest is the government-backed scheme. That's free to do if you want to do it yourself. I mean, we actually set up Nest schemes for clients, and we charge them a small fee for doing it. It's a bit fiddly, and it's also fiddly linking it in with your payroll software. So, but consider the payroll scheme if you have employees, considering the costs of employing somebody, how much that will cost you. You have to consider the employer's national insurance. You have to consider the pension cost, the holiday cost, the sickness cost. So these are the kind of things you have to consider when you're starting up in business. Consider the HR situation, you know, the contracts. Are you in the CIS industry, you know, the CIS building scheme, you know, for construction broadly? If you're in that scheme, that's fiddly, that's nasty. You might be a contractor, you might be a subcontractor. Either way, you need to register one or both of those depending on your needs. If you don't register, there's horrible fines. If you're doing CIS work, if you're doing work within the construction industry, that is, you are likely to have to register. If you don't, you will expect monthly fines of £100. Consider a decent website. Consider proper emails to make yourself look like a bigger business. It's not very expensive now to get a website set up and to actually get a domain-based email rather than just using a sort of a Gmail account or something like that. Actually have a proper setup. You know, for 200 or 300 quid, you're going to get something half decent. But research it; it's all out there for you. You're going to need insurance. You may well need public liability insurance. If you're a one-man limited company, you're going to need public liability and employer liability insurance. You may find you can't get a bank set up without employer liability insurance. They'll ask you questions. Why haven't you got one? The VAT, you register for VAT, they'll ask you, have you got employer liability insurance? Have you got public liability? If you haven't, you know, you may not be able to get VAT registered. I've seen it quite a lot. Again, the public liability and employer's liability is pretty cheap. You can go online, go to Simply Business, Hiscox for example, £100 a year, 150 quid a year possibly for public and employer liability insurance. But you're going to need it, you've got to cover yourself legally. So there's many things to consider. This is not an exhaustive list, but if you're not going to use an accountant, make a note of these kind of things, plot it down. Hopefully you've done a business plan, you know why you're going into business on your own account. You'll know whether you need funding. These are all things that need to be considered before you start your business. Thank you.